With the contract set to expire the last day of the year, the Action Committee delivered instructions to all union members with specific shifts and picketing locations, and all teachers were asked to meet in Turner Hall at 7:30 a.m. on Thursday, January 2nd, to begin the strike. The bargaining committee left them with a message. Remember, in union there is strength. Membership had grown to 300 members of Local 212, and almost all of them, as well as many of their colleagues who weren't members, surrounded MATC's main building despite temperatures in the low teens. Frigid gusts of wind grabbed at the signs in picketers' hands as they dutifully made their rounds. The only refuge was the warm coffee served up by fellow strikers from the back of a station wagon and the camaraderie of common purpose.
Larry and I got engaged on January 1st of '69, and 5 minutes later he was called to be a strike captain, so we barely had a chance to talk for the next several weeks. I was a strong supporter of the union and actually did participate in marching around the main building on a couple of very cold winter mornings.
During a strike, I was the strike committee chairman, and there was a lot of people that come there daily, check in and out, just like we had to check in and out for classes.
Yeah, I had strong support from my wife. We had a 2-year-old at that time that she would come down and push him around in a stroller on the picket line.
The administration and the mainstream media did their best to downplay the impact of the strike, claiming that the college was still running at about 20 to 25% of its normal capacity that day. College officials reported to the Journal and the Sentinel that about 160 full-time teachers were on the job, but as most strikers remember, only a handful of the 425 full-time day school instructors actually reported to their classes. The strikers were exuberant. They had achieved their initial goal of stopping the normal functioning of the college and bringing the demands of MATC's faculty to the public's eye. While the administration instructed students to attend all their normal classes that morning, very few students actually crossed the picket line. In fact, by strike's end, they would join it. They also helped pass out leaflets and flyers as extracurricular and athletic activities were canceled. While the courage and commitment of the strikers is best illustrated by their endless picketing in frigid temperatures, there were additional personal costs as well.
Hey, when are you going to get out there and walk the line with us? I said, well, I signed the paper to join the union. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. And he said, no, you got to get out there and you got to make the rounds. And so I did that. And, I had 3 kids at the time, and the 4th one was born in January of that year, and fortunately I had part-time jobs that I could call on, and security job.
It was, I constantly felt stressed. I was stressed all the time, and then I don't even think my father knew that Stan was involved with the union, ever. I don't think, until there was a picture on the front page of Stan and George Parkinson. It was a Saturday, I remember, and then I had to tell him what was going on. But Stan's father was a member of the garment workers union, so he understood, and he sent us a little money, I remember, during the time. But I always remember feeling very, very stressed. Couldn't wait till it was over.
We actually were eligible for food stamps. I went and got my food stamps. A lot of the guys use food stamps.
My wife and I had applied to adopt a child, and we had been told it would probably be at least a year, and about 2 months later, just before the strike, we were told, you're going to have your child. And he came that first week of the strike. Well, my wife was working. She continued to work. I helped watch Nick as much as I could. This was a period of time where you didn't ask your parents for help. I would not go to my parents. She would not go to her parents. So we ended up eating everything in all the cupboards. We survived basically on, I was officiating football and basketball and so forth back then, on those paychecks, and it was a rough 6 weeks, and if it had gone longer, it would have been very, very difficult, and I might have had to go to my parents and ask for help.
What made the personal sacrifices even more difficult to bear was the reality that some faculty did cross the picket line and refused to participate in the strike. Strike participation seemed to differ by department, and, while faculty members treated each other with civility, there were instances of tension, especially as the strike waned. Of the approximate 425 teachers, 300 were members of Local 212 as the strike began. Those non-members may or may not have belonged to other groups hoping to represent MTC teachers, and many of them were critical of their striking colleagues, branding them as unprofessional for abandoning their students.
The things that's sad about strikes is that it always leaves a bad taste in someone's mouth, and they develop a enmity against another person, and they carry it through their whole career. I knew about 3 situations where they had been friends. They were in the same unit, they were in the same division, they were in the same class, they were in the same office, and they didn't talk to each other
That's true.
for 30 years.
Yeah.
Letters of support and donation poured in from the AFT National and from locals across the country. Teachers from Florida, New York, California, Michigan, even Wyoming sent whatever they could in support. The Milwaukee County Labor Council and locals of the machinists, bakers, United Auto Workers, steel workers, electrical workers, and other groups got behind the striking teachers. Approached by Local 212 Vice President Karsten Keller, groups like the NAACP chapter showed its support as well. By the end of the strike, about $2,400 had been donated, with an average donation of $25. The Spectrum of Students, an umbrella group representing all student groups, urged that negotiations begin again in earnest and that a student be present to witness the events. Director Ramsey flatly refused and accused the students of acting as pawns for the union, which only infuriated the students further. On January 10th, a group of students sent a petition backing the teachers with 239 student signatures to the board to illustrate the level of support the faculty had.
I think most students who are behind it will never get 100% participation. Right now, about 70% of the students are out of the school, and this may go up to about 85-90% now.
Is the SOS on any one side in this dispute, the teachers or the school?
As a coalition, as a coalition, SOS is not on any one particular side. We will boycott the school because the administration refused to even begin the talk.
The reluctance of the board to continue negotiations. We got up to the point of negotiating items dealing with salary and fringe benefits and working conditions and teacher workload. The board stopped bargaining. They said, you can take what we've offered or leave it.
There are no negotiating sessions or fact-finding sessions scheduled at the moment?
As a matter of fact, the board has refused to go to mediation for 5 successive days now. We have requested reopening of negotiations. We have requested mediation. The WRC has been willing to go to mediation, or the mediator has been appointed, but the board has steadfastly refused to meet on that basis.
Dr. Ramsey, is there any thought been given to legal steps to end the strike, injunctions?
No, the board has not indicated they would go into any legal action. They could because of strikes being illegal of public employees in Wisconsin, and secondly because of the breach of contract. But I think, in speaking for myself, I would like to find an amiable solution through the fact-finding procedure and across the table in the fact-finding procedure, rather than having to resort to a negative action once again of an injunction or some legal action.
Fact-finding will not resolve this situation because no matter how long the board stalls around with a request for fact-finding, sooner or later they have to solve it at the bargaining table, and our opinion is, why not now?
The pressure on the board to resume talks with 212 finally paid off when an official hearing was held on Wednesday, January 15th, with 2 mediators from the Wisconsin Employee Rights Commission. While the only movement was the college agreeing to an additional 1% pay increase, the strikers felt they had some momentum. But because there still weren't agreements on issues regarding professionalism and shared governance, the 200 instructors who met at Turner Hall just 3 days later voted unanimously to continue their strike. The WERC mediators convened another marathon bargaining session for Friday, January 24th, in hopes of ending the strike before the second semester was to begin the following Monday. While the union convinced the board to pay the teachers' contribution to their retirement funds, a tremendous gain, they still refused to move on issues relating to teaching conditions. Once the AFT's budget analysts were allowed to look at MTC's books, they reported that MTC had more than adequate money to pay the teachers' demands, but the board would not budge. As a result, second semester classes began on a reduced schedule with the majority of the school's faculty still on strike.